We have always been fascinated with our own image, and so it's no wonder the human face shows up so much in art. One of the earliest materials used in sculpture is clay. Watch as Brinsley Tyrell of Ravenna, Ohio creates a realistic clay representation of a live model.
Most of my sculpture is much bigger than this. It's not as realistic as this. It has lots of different materials involved. I've worked in glass, I've worked in enamel, I work a lot in stone, some in wood. And I think that's true with a lot of artists, that you don't just work in one material. Well, I'm going to model Diane's head in clay. One of the things I enjoy a lot is doing a portrait. And I think it's really good training. I'm going to use ordinary water-based clay, the same sort of clay that you would dig up out of your garden. But it won't stand up very well on its own, so I'm twisting some wire in order that I have something to hold the clay up with. But I don't want such a big ball of wire that it keeps poking out everywhere. There's very little needed in the way of equipment, etc., to model a head, or for that matter, to model anything. Casting the clay after you've made it into a permanent medium is where you might need some equipment. I've got to make sure this clay is firmly enough fixed on the metal that it doesn't slide off, which it can do. Diane's got this long, graceful neck. That I want to try and get. To start with, one of the things I'm doing is trying to get this set up so that that metal I put on will be in the right place to support everything in this wonderful top knot up here. What I like about clay is it's so malleable that you can push it around, set something up quickly and take it out. Some people use sort of oil-based clay, and I really don't like it because it's too stiff. I find actually one of the battles in doing this is one wants to stay up close and keep one's hands on the clay all the time. And in a way, that's the worst thing to do, because when you're really close, you can't see what you're doing. I'll move to try and establish that a little. Working with clay is really a sort of additive process. If you're carving stone, you've got a big block of stuff and you're taking it away and trying to reveal something in the stone. But with clay, you're starting out with nothing, or I suppose a pile of dirt, and trying to sort of build things on. So I'm sort of continually adding little bits of clay, trying to bring this to life. One of the things people don't realize is they actually don't know what they look like, because when we look in the mirror, we see ourselves backwards. We see the reversed image. We actually never see how other people see us. This is the artist's excuse if the model doesn't like the portrait. Then the artist tries to tell the model she's wrong. Modeling this in clay on a metal armature. Because I've got a metal armature in there, a lot of clay gets fired in a kiln and turned into ceramics. But if there's a metal armature in there, you can't do that. So when I finish this head and I like it, I'll make a plaster mold off it, and I'll cast it into plaster, which is a sort of holding medium, and making the mold is a little tricky until you know what you're doing. And then out of that mold, I can cast it into a number of different materials.
Watching clay being made into pots on a spinning wheel is very fascinating. The artist has the choice of creating long, slender, or short, stout pots simply by changing the way their fingers touch the clay. Watch Donna Webb of Akron, Ohio, as she creates some very delicate pots.
I'm a ceramic artist. I work in collaboration with my husband, Joe Blue Sky. I throw on the potter's wheel and make the vessels or the pottery. I also know how to glaze and fire kilns. And Joe is a wonderful sculptor of the figure. I'm wedging the clay. It has little bubbles of air in it. If I don't get rid of those little bubbles of air, they act like pebbles when you're driving down the road, and they make the wheel bump. And so I want to make sure that there are not any of them in there. And sometimes you can hear them pop in the clay when you do this. This is called spiral wedging. Can you see it starts to look like a seashell? And that's what you want to happen. I do this until the clay is consistent in its composition. There are not any dry areas or wet areas, and until it feels to me as though it's smooth and I don't hear any of that popping sound. This is an electric wheel, and when I push with my toe, the wheel goes around. The harder I push with my toe, the faster the wheel goes. This process is called centering. And when I center, I need to make sure that all the clay is lined up exactly around the middle of the spinning wheel. And so I start by tapping it into position. And then, because the clay is a little bit sticky and my hands need to really be able to slip, I wet the clay and wet my hands. This is a sponge, a bucket of water, and you can see I have a towel wrapped across my legs because this part of the process is a little messy. So I'm getting everything wet, and then I'm going to hold on really tight, and I'm going to push the clay so that it gets completely round. First I go up, and then I go down. And then I come up, and then I go down. This style of throwing is called throwing off the hump. And because I want just a small pot, I'm only going to really center this very top piece of clay. So I'm going to open it up with my thumb, pull back a little bit. Then this part is called throwing. If you watch closely, you'll see the clay starts to rise up. It's because my fingers are pushing, one from the inside, one from the outside, and as the wheel goes around, I do a pull. Once again, down to the bottom, and pulling up. And now I'm going to take this piece off the wheel, cut in. This is a little pot that Joe might use later in a sculpture. How about now if I make it a little jar? So I'm going to center a piece of clay. This I'm pushing really hard, and you see how steady I'm staying. My elbows are on my knees. I'm not wiggling around. I'm staying really quiet. I'm pushing the clay up a little bit, and then I'm pushing the clay down a little bit. And I can feel it getting quiet. It's not bumping my hand anymore. It's running really smoothly. And now it's ready to make a little jar. So I'll push my thumb down inside and open it up. Then I come back outside and inside, push my fingers together, and pull up. And I want this to be a nice sturdy looking little jar, so let me make a good solid little shoulder on it. I did that by pushing down with my finger. And I want it to be a little fatter, so let's go inside and push its belly out a little bit. Now it's a little bit fat at the bottom, so I'm going to push it in a bit, give it a little bit fatter belly by pulling it out. And then I'll use my wooden knife. And my wire tool. And slow the wheel down so it doesn't go flying out across the room. Dry my fingers a little bit and set it aside. When Joe finishes working on a figure, he usually gives it to me to begin making some decisions about color. And so I have a woman here who's stirring her pot. The exciting thing about working in ceramics is that the colors are often not the same before they're fired as they are after. And so you need to sort of have little reminders about what it is that the finished product is going to look like. And that's what these test tiles allow me to do. I've found that people's skins are lots of different colors. This is one that's particularly rosy and orange that I like to use, but I have a number of different colors that I use for people's faces. Sometimes I have to ask Jo, does her ear start here, or is this her arm, or is this her coat? Sometimes I wonder if people have socks on, for example, and I have to ask Jo, what is this for? But most of the time he's really clear, and I can tell exactly what it is that I need to put color on. When I finish painting these pieces, I'm going to dry them very slowly and carefully until they're so dry that when I touch them, they don't feel cool. They feel warm to the touch. And then I'll put them in a kiln and very slowly heat them up. Over a period of 24 hours, I'll raise the temperature little by little until the whole inside of the kiln is glowing. I'll leave them there for about 2 or 3 hours, and then I'll cool the kiln really slowly. And when they come out, the pieces will be hard and no longer soft and pliable. But they also won't be shiny. They'll be very dull looking. After that, I'll take glaze, which is kind of like powdered glass, and paint it onto the surface. And again, I'll put it into the kiln, take it very slowly through the climbing temperature, and then at the end of about 24 hours, they'll come out and they'll be shiny and very colorful. There are a couple of tests to know whether a collaboration is successful or not. One is to ask, do we like it? And the second question we ask ourselves is, could either of us have done this by ourselves?
Teaching materials for sharing art are available on the web at wneo.org/sharingart. Funding for this series was provided by the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation and Northeastern Ohio Education Association. NEOEA's members include elementary and secondary teachers, university professors, and support professionals proudly serving students attending the public schools and colleges of Northeastern Ohio.